Let's run it.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Kody and Nick Podcast. Kody, how was your weekend, my man?
It was good, man. It was the first weekend in a long time I didn't have a bunch of plans, so I enjoyed just hanging out on the couch, watched plenty of basketball and golf this weekend, just relaxed. How was yours?
Sweet. That's my kind of weekend. Mine was good. Had a little nice dinner on Friday, a little family lunch on Saturday. Kind of relaxed last night, so kind of the same thing. Not too much on the docket. It was nice to relax a little bit.
That's why we're bringing in this great content. It's gonna be perfect. We're both well rested, ready to go.
Really just raring to go here.
Yep.
So I wanted to get to a little bit of a format change that we're going to make here. We've been kind of rushing up against the end of our episodes with just a lot of trying to rush a lot of information into the last 5 minutes. So we're going to just try to segment these a little bit, do two-parters on the divisions, 20-minute episodes. That way we can fit in a little bit more content, make the videos a little more digestible, and that way we're not running up against the time limit here and trying to say what we want to say when we are running out of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we both agree that, while we're kind of in this lull of a summertime, just kind of keep videos short. And then as fantasy time wraps up, those kind of longer videos where, free agents to pick up, fantasy trade options, stuff like that. I mean, those are a lot more that we'll get more in depth about once it's actually relevant. But for now, this video, we're going to go a little bit into the Bucs and the Saints, projected to be the top two teams in the NFC South. We'll kind of see if Carolina can make a splash or not. But how about you take it away with the Bucs? What do you feel any kind of way about them? It seems pretty straightforward, but.
I think you and me are pretty aligned here. I think really the only issue I see with the Bucs as far as their offseason goes is the offensive line concerns. Obviously, that's been a giant strength of this team the last couple of years, and losing Kappa and Marpet is going to be a challenge. They were both top-tier players, and they still got the tackles in place there, but I think that's really the only concern I see here. They're kind of just running it back for the most part with other players. They've lost a little bit of their defensive depth, but I think they're the clear favorites in the South, and they've kind of benefited from the NFC just weakening a little bit over the offseason.
Yeah, I would imagine that they have the second best odds to win the NFC. And if you put them in the AFC, they may not be in the top 3 or 4. There's a pretty big difference in conferences, which really helps them out. And their division's super weak. The Saints, who we have here, I believe their over-unders at 8, which is the second highest over-under. So they should take advantage of an easy division as long as their team is healthy going into the playoffs. They have a chance at a Super Bowl. So, it's going to be a fun year for them. I'm kind of going into this season now as this is Tom Brady's retirement season, since he had his little stint this past off season. So right. I'm just kind of going to enjoy it as if it's his final year. And I think they're going to have a good team and an easy division, and kind of similar to what he did with the Pats for all those years, just run through the division, get a high playoff, 1 or 2 seed, and ride some home games late into the playoffs. So I like them. They're going to be a good team, and like I said, they'll take advantage of their easy division.
Yeah, never a good bet to bet against Brady, especially in a playoff game. I think on a neutral field, the Rams would probably be favored right now in a game against the Bucs. But the fact that their division's so weak, probably I would say has them as the favorite in the NFC. I'm not looking at the lines right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were the favorite to win it. So the Bucs are kind of hashed out. We don't have to talk too much about their football prospects.
Sure.
We can kind of move into the fantasy part here. We'll start with Brady. Again, there's not too much to say here. He's going to go from QB 5 to 10 in most drafts just because he doesn't have the upside of the rushing guys. But I think taking him even as high as QB 5 is pretty safe. He's going to deliver 202 every week at the very least, and he'll have his 4 or 5 touchdown games on top of that. So Brady's got the high upside. He's got the really high floor as well. He's a great option in the 5th or 6th round.
I completely agree. From a fantasy perspective, he just throws so many touchdowns, especially if you're in a touchdown. We're in our league, we have throwing touchdowns count as 6 points. So the rushing isn't that big of an advantage. Obviously, the yards can be, but touchdown-wise, it's not too big of a difference. So
yeah, it closes the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom Brady is amazing in that league, and I've had him in a few other leagues that our points are structured a little bit differently. He's still a very, very capable quarterback and very consistent. when you kind of lean into Lamar or Kyler, they do have bad weeks where they can put up duds, and you don't really see that out of Brady too often. He may have one in a season. So I love him, and we can kind of use this to move into the receivers, but he's a quarterback that you can easily stack with a Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, whichever one fits your draft slot better or falls to you. You could easily grab them and then grab Brady, and you won't have to really reach for either. If you grab Jamar early and you want to pair him with Burrow, you're probably going to have to reach on Burrow or something like that. I think this is, a really good offense, and this is a really good chance to get a stack, which I do find valuable. But we'll kind of lead that into the wide receivers here. I'm a little bit higher on Mike Evans than say Chris Godwin, a little bit because of the injury. I do think Chris Godwin's a very valuable fantasy wide receiver. PPR, he's probably, one of the top options out there. So as long as he comes back healthy, he's going to be great. Obviously, right now there's a little bit of a difference in where they're getting drafted because of that injury. Not to ramble, but pretty much if the injury is going well, then Chris Godwin and Mike Evans ADP are going to get a little bit closer together. They'll probably both be between that 12 to 16 range. And I'm going to take my chance on Mike Evans. He's just done it longer and more consistently than Chris Godwin has.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with anything that you said necessarily. I'm a little bit on the opposite side. I like Godwin a little more than Evans, but I think that's just more of the style of receiver that I prefer. I think I like the high target guys rather than the high volume touchdown guys. Having Evans in a few leagues last year, I mean, obviously he's a great player, but the inconsistencies are there. You'll have games where he'll catch 2 or 3 balls for 30 yards, and that's all he's going to get that day. But you'll have games where he'll catch 2 or 3 touchdowns and he'll win you the league. Godwin's a little more consistent. He's going to get his 8 or 9 targets every time out, and he's only going to score 5 to 8 touchdowns this year most likely, but he's never gonna throw you a dud. So I think it's kind of moot to talk about their ADPs right now. Like you said, Godwin's going 50th overall wide receiver 20, Evans 26th overall wide receiver 9. But it's all going to come down to how Godwin looks in camp and what his injury is looking like. If you have to draft right now, I'm taking the value on Godwin. That's about 50th overall to 26. That's about a 2-round drop for what I think is going to be the target leader in this offense as long as he's healthy. So I would take the value on Godwin, but again, this is just going to be one of those things that gets a little clearer once we get closer to the year.
Yeah, I would also say this really depends on your team formatting as well as your kind of strategy overall at this point in the draft, because they're both going to be, I imagine they're going to be in that 3-4 area. Mike Evans is probably still going to go a little bit higher just because he won't have an injury concern going into the season. But, if you get a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase in that first round, then I probably would take Mike Evans and just take the super high ceiling play there. But if this is your wide receiver 1 and you're not getting into the 4th round, say you went 3 running backs and Chris Godwin's out there, even though he may miss a couple weeks, I mean, he could be a very consistent wide receiver 1 for your team. He may not have those crazy weeks like Mike Evans will, but he's still very consistent. So either one you get is going to be a good option. I think any part of this Tampa Bay offense is going to be a good option for you fantasy wise. Just kind of depends on which one's going to fit your team a little bit better. But with that, we can kind of roll into Fournette here. We both like Fournette. I think he's going at a very, very interesting part in the draft, but I'll let you kind of take it off to start with.
Sure. Fournette's he's at 20th overall right now. That's RB11. So you're looking at right around the 2-3 turn, maybe closer into the middle of the 2nd round. But I think that's great value for Fournette. I mean, the roster, as far as the running backs go behind him, is not much. I mean, they drafted a kid in the 3rd round this year. They still got Keyshawn Vaughn hanging around. And I think Bernard's still on the team, but he didn't really do anything last year. So I don't think there's really anybody on the roster that's even going to come close to threatening his touches as long as he, stays healthy, which, I mean, there's been concerns about that in the past, but you could find that with any running back in the NFL. So it's kind of hard to handicap him there when pretty much everybody has that issue. But Brady trusts him. And even if his efficiency isn't great, I think he's going to get a lot of touches and a good offense and score at least 10 touchdowns and catch 40, 50 balls. And it's going to be really hard for him to not be a top 10 guy if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where he's getting drafted at, he's going to be your RB2 on your roster, or you're going to have a top wide receiver and he's going to be your RB1, which either option, I'm
totally fine
perfectly
with it as
fine
an
with.
RB1, by the way.
Yes, if you get your chance to get a Jefferson or Chase or Cooper Cup and Fournette falls to you, he's a great RB1. Very, very consistent player last year when it comes to fantasy. So as long as he's out there, I mean, he's a plug and play every week. You're never going to even think about taking him out of your lineup. So, and where he's getting drafted, I don't think I think that's a completely fair value. Like that's one of those that someone's going to take him and you're going to be like, wow, I wish that he would have fallen to me, a couple spots later because he's going to be valued higher, I think.
I like his floor is really high. Whereas, I mean, there's a lot of running backs you can kind of poke holes in this set. Like there is like DeAndre Swift, I'd say is a guy that's going kind of around him, maybe even a few spots higher. And I think Fournette's floor is just way, way above what Swift's is on a weekly basis and on a season long basis. Obviously Swift's probably a little more of a dynamic player, but I just don't really see how Fournette fails here unless he gets hurt.
I mean, in 17 games, I would say the Bucs are going to be leading in 12 to 13 of them, and you're going to be wanting to pound the ball at that time. Out of 17 games, the Lions might be leading in 4 to 5 of them, hopefully more, this year. But when you think about that, I'm going to take Leonard Fournette all day in that situation. So we both like him. If he stays where he's at when it comes to draft time, I would definitely take him there without hesitation. And then last guy here, Gronk for the Buccaneers. I mean, now it's kind of tough. You're really just guessing at where he's going to fall at drafts if he says that he's coming back. He's kind of going to be that middle tier tight end, but I would probably still take him in that middle tier just because when he's on the field, he's still a top tight end in the, in fantasy and in the NFL. So,
yeah, we both have kind of talked about this before where we sort of like to stay away from that middle tight end area. You'd rather either take your guy in the first 4 or 5 rounds and get a stud or just kind of wait and be in the streaming tier, because what ends up happening with tight end is there's usually about 3 guys that are good and the rest are not very good. So those middle tier tight ends have trouble moving into that top tier sometimes. But with Gronk, I really don't. I mean, I wouldn't argue with it. Obviously, him and Brady have a good history, and when he was healthy last year, he was great. So if you can snag him in the 9th or 10th round, that's great value. I mean, we'll see. Like you said, once he comes back officially, his ADP is probably going to go up a lot. So we'll just have to see where he ends up. But right now, he's at 124th overall. I would absolutely take the chance on that because you can just book this. He's going to come back. So he'll just wait it out so he doesn't have to actually go to training camp. So I think Gronk will be just fine in fantasy. And if he's still at this ADP, I'm snagging him for sure. And then I want to touch on Gage real quick because there are some people that are higher on him than we are. I think he's going to need an injury to be relevant. Brady's a great quarterback, but it's really hard to sustain 4 solid pass catchers plus Fournette, who's going to catch his 50 balls this year too. So I don't think Gage is going to have weekly value unless there's an injury in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Chris Godwin and then you can get Russell Gage at value, I don't mind snagging both those players. And then just once Godwin comes back, just moving Gage to your bench or even dropping him for a more valuable player. But that's kind of the only value I see in him. I mean, other than that, like you said, you're kind of just waiting on an injury to happen for him to be relevant. And even if he is relevant those first few weeks, once Godwin comes back, I mean, that's the possession receiver. Mike Evans is the deep threat, and Gronkowski is just the safety blanket for that offense. And, then you have Fournette coming out of the backfield that can catch out of the backfield as well. So it's tough to get that kind of 5th option on an offense on your fantasy roster. So for that reason, I would not want to pick him up unless I'm grabbing Godwin as well. And he's going to be out for a couple weeks.
We talk about handcuffed running back sometimes. I feel like Gage is kind of one of those rare. He's like a handcuffed wide receiver. If Evans, Gronk, or Godwin isn't playing one week, he'll have some relevance. And, that's a lot of guys. So injuries are going to happen. I'm sure he'll have his weeks, but hanging on to him on your roster is just waiting for one of those guys to get hurt. And, you don't like to play that game. I'd rather see a guy that has a chance to show me something in the first couple of weeks and, create value for himself. Do you have anything else you want to get into on the Bucs here?
No, I don't think so. We'll kind of touch on them a little bit more of the best bets segment, but let's go ahead and move into the Saints. What do you think about the Saints this year?
Sure. This is a tough team for me. It's really going to come down to Winston, honestly. I mean, there's just a lot of change going on here. Obviously, the coaching staff with no more Sean Payton. Dennis Allen is an in-house hire, so he might just keep the same systems in place. But who knows? It's new guys calling the plays, so we'll see what happens with that. But I mean, their moves in the offseason, I don't really have too much problem with in a vacuum. I mean, I really liked Olave as a player. They gave up a whole lot to move up into the draft slot to get him, but we really liked the player. So they kind of needed a dynamic piece on offense. So I don't really have any problem with their moves specifically. It's just really going to come down to Winston and how he plays. And I wouldn't like that bet if I was the Saints. So I'm not too high on their prospects compared to the industry.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, their over under is set at 8 wins. And I mean, you get plus money with the under, and with a new coach, and you're going to have a quarterback coming off of an injury. I mean, it just seems like they're destined for a letdown year. I will say they have added some good veteran pieces on both the offense and the defensive side. So that may, kind of help a young coaching staff really, keep the locker room. Let's say if the season does start out a little bumpy, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're not betting that over with confidence. You don't think this is going to be a playoff or potential, deep playoff team by any means. So they do have a little bit of fantasy relevance, but as far as NFL relevance this year, I could see them kind of stinking it up and, just a big transition year for the franchise altogether.
Yeah. Really just going to come down to Winston. And like you said, I really like the under on that 8 wins because they're going to have to get to 9-8 for you to lose your money. 8 wins, you'll even out.
Yep.
But betting on them to be an under 500 team, I think is a good bet in a 17-game season with Winston at the helm. I mean, maybe he proves me wrong. He played pretty well in the limited sample we saw last year, but again, with Sean Payton and with a little bit more structure, Teron Armstead heading out as well is a problem. So we'll see if their new tackle can hold down the fort. But yeah, they got a lot of questions. So we can just jump into the fantasy part here. Alvin Kamara obviously is their biggest piece on offense and in fantasy by a wide margin. Again, kind of a tough guy to talk about right now because of his legal situation. We don't really know what to expect there, but assuming it's only 2, maybe 4 games max, I'm hearing most of the things I've read are that Kamara is probably not looking at anything more than a 4-game suspension if it gets one. But that being said, at 18th overall right now, he's clearly dropped because of the worry of the suspension, because otherwise I don't see how he wouldn't be in at least the back end of the first round. So if you have to draft right now, I'd go ahead and take the value in the middle of the second round. Worst case scenario, he's out 4 games. You can plug and play somebody in those 4 games and then have him come back and be a great RB1 for your team. So I just like the value there.
Yeah, I can agree with you. I was a little bit lower on Kamara the last time that we recorded this, when we recorded the super long version of it.
Right.
I'm kind of rising on him because, like you said, I mean, if you can get through, let's say he misses 4 weeks and you're worst case scenario, you're 1-3 or 0-4. I mean, there's so much time there for your fantasy season to turn around, and getting a piece like Kamara will do that for you.
Oh yeah.
In an offense that, and we'll get into the receiving pieces, I don't think that they're going to be a huge receiving team. Like, I feel like this offense is going to kind of go as Kamara goes. So you're going to have easy, week winning games from him. And worst case scenario, I think he's going to be, it's still a top 5 running back. And because of him missing maybe a few games, you're getting him at the RB10. I think that's insane value. So I like
and
him
you
a
can
lot
scoop
more.
up
Yeah.
scoop up Ingram late drafts too, because he'll be a serviceable guy for those 4 games while Kamara's out theoretically. So even if he were to get suspended, you have a guy that you can plug and play. Sometimes it's kind of tough. You'll end up with like these really good guys that sort of get filled by committees, and it's really hard to have. Like McCaffrey last year was sort of the biggest reason that was such a problem, was that no one player filled his role. With the Saints, I think Ingram's going to get 80 to 85% of the work that Kamara will. So, I mean, I think you're not losing much for those 4 weeks while you're going to be missing Kamara. We can move
Absolutely.
into Thomas here. I'm going to throw it to you to start because I honestly have no idea what to think about this player right now.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. I am going to say that I'm going to pass on Thomas in most situations. I mean, it would have to be a situation where he fell to me. It's just, we have the stat here, hasn't caught a touchdown since December of 2019. I mean, I don't even think he's really been on the field too much since then either. So, the
No, you're
last
right.
time it was with Drew Brees, or maybe he played a little last year. I can't even remember. I mean, I remember picking him up last year because someone dropped him in our league, and it ended up screwing me because I had no fab at the end of the year. So, uh,
I remember.
maybe I'm a little burned by him, but I'm just out on him. I would rather take the deep shot on Chris Olave later in drafts if I'm going to take any piece of this receiving pie.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about it. I mean, do you really feel any different about it?
Honestly, I have some different thoughts on Thomas. He's at 71 overall right now, wide receiver 33. That is a pretty big discount on a guy that if he stays healthy and he gets 130, 140 targets like you would expect him to, if he's the full-time number one in this offense, I don't really see how he falls below wide receiver 24 in a PPR format, but the injuries are a huge concern, and it's really tough to trust that he's the same guy that he was 3 years ago when he was the number one wide receiver. And like you said, the Winston factor complicates things. You've got Jarvis Landry there now, which kind of, intuitively you would think he kind of fills the same role that Thomas does. So maybe the Saints aren't as confident as Thomas is that he's going to get back on the field and be the same guy. I mean, they might have, that's kind of Jarvis Landry, I feel like, is Michael Thomas insurance to a degree, because he can kind of fill the role that Thomas would. And then Olave can be sort of the gadget guy and the bigger downfield play guy rather than the possession guy over the middle. So
Yep.
I don't know what to expect with Thomas, but I honestly, I don't mind if you snag him in the late sixth round. I can't argue with that because his upside is pretty massive for someone going that late.
His upside used to be massive for someone going that late. I just don't know if he has that same upside anymore. I mean,
Well,
that's like drafting Zeke where he's getting drafted and thinking he's going to be RB1 potentially.
yeah,
I mean, you just got to put yourself in a little bit of a reality check. I think if he has a good year, like his ceiling is that RB 24 to 30
wide receiver
range.
24.
Wide
Yeah,
receiver 24 to 30 range. I mean, he's going to be, either a flex or wide receiver 3 on most teams. So I think he's going to probably maybe out. I just think everything has to go right for him to perform where he's getting drafted. I could easily see him being irrelevant a few weeks into the year. I mean,
yeah. I don't blame you if you're out, but I just see a little bit more upside than you do, I guess, in this situation. I think that if Thomas is healthy and he's the number one, he could see 10 targets a game. And if that's the case, it's just going to be difficult for him to fall out of wide receiver 2 range in PPR. Opportunity
that's
will
fair.
trump talent a lot of the time. We've seen that time and again in fantasy. So especially again, this is a big scoring format thing. Always remember that going into your drafts.
Yep.
Thomas much more PPR than non as far as value, and especially like that's just something that kind of keeps his value afloat. When even if he comes out and he's not the same guy, if he can catch 7 balls a game, he's going to be a decent wide receiver too. But we'll
Yep.
see. I don't really blame you for being out on him. But again, I think you're the discount you're getting right now is pretty heavy.
So here's my last thing, and then we'll kind of move into best bets. But last year, when Jameis was the QB of this team, was there a fantasy relevant wide receiver option?
No, but I think you got to
Right.
look at who he was throwing to at the same time. I mean, none of
Well,
these guys are Michael Thomas from a pedigree standpoint. So
I agree with that, but we went from three completely irrelevant names to Michael Thomas coming back, Jarvis Landry, who's still very talented, and Chris Olave, a top draft pick. So whether it was the players, that he couldn't, whatever the issue was, we went from zero fantasy relevant wide receivers to potentially three good wide receivers getting some of his very small pie. So that's where I would rather just wait a little bit longer and take the shot on Olave, because I think if
right.
any of these players do burst, I would take Olave. Um, where he's getting drafted over Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Olave is going at 113, wide receiver 47. He probably has the highest upside, I guess, out of the group, if you wanted to say that. But again, I mean, he's a rookie wide receiver, and like you said, this offense is not going to be pass first most weeks. I think they want to operate as more of a defense run the ball type of team than,
For sure.
throwing the ball all over the yard like they used to. So I think that's a slight concern for the passing game, but I don't know. I mean, I think Thomas needed some help around him. I mean, if you would have just thrown Thomas onto this team last year, he would have been the clear cut number one, and he'd be getting all the defensive attention. So I don't really see the other pass catchers as much of a problem as you do. I think if he's on the field getting a 25% target share, it's going to be hard for him to bust. But I think him getting on the field is the biggest question.
I mean, worst case scenario for me, he's a very fantasy relevant wide receiver, and it's just another player in the pool that makes things interesting. I mean, I would rather there be some fantasy option from that team than none at all like last year.
100%.
So if it's Michael Thomas, that's great. And if you got him in drafts, then you got one over on me. So
there is a lot of variables that go in there, though. So it is tough to trust. I understand. I just think that wide receiver 33 is a pretty massive discount. I'd expect him to be going a little higher than that, just offhand. But we can transition into the best bets here. I only have one here, and it's kind of one we already talked about. That's Saints under 8 wins at plus 115. I just think that's a solid bet to make. They're going to have to get to 9 wins, which is above 500 for you to lose your money. And betting on Jameis Winston to lose more football games than he wins over a 17-game sample is probably a good bet to make. And again, if they're very top heavy. So if Kamara, Winston, or Thomas goes down, they just don't have a lot in the reserve to fill those voids of their playmakers. So I think they need a lot to go right. And if a few things go wrong, the season could go south.
I love that under. And then, one of my favorite bets is just Tom Brady to win the MVP. You get it at plus 900 right now, even if it's, you put a small amount on it and just get to ride it for the season. It's gonna be a fun year. It's probably gonna be his last, so I just want to enjoy every aspect I can of it. So that's gonna be
the narrative. You can just see the narrative already, and that's kind of plays into NFC a lot because with those guys, if there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks at the end of the year that all have really good numbers, it's kind of the narrative is the thing that it sort of comes down to in the MVP voters' minds. And Brady playing at 44 or 45 this year is just already written there for them. So I get it. And I like him at plus 900. That's pretty good value for him. I actually have a prediction as well. I think Brady's going to be throwing passes for the Miami Dolphins next year. We'll see if that ends up coming to pass, but you heard it here first. If that's the case, I think if Tua struggles this year, you're gonna see Brady make a move down south. So I
don't know, man. Tyreek.
I just wanted to throw that into the sphere there.
Tyreek loves Tua. In case you didn't hear, Tua is a more accurate passer than Patrick Mahomes. So
I've heard
it's going to be a huge year in
Miami.
Apparently. Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode. This is going to go up. It'll be June 13th on Monday morning. So, like, comment, subscribe. We're going to go ahead and do the other teams in the NFC South and get that one posted up midweek, probably Wednesday. So be sure to check out that one. And then, if you guys have any fantasy questions or anything like that, shoot them over to us. We'd love to be able to do like a mailbag segment at some point, definitely during the fantasy season. So hit us up. If you guys have any takes that you think we're way off on, let us know about that also. But
like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys.
Sure.
Appreciate
you.
All
right. Peace out, everyone.